Welcome to nettTracker. This video tutorial has been created to help you put all of the key settings in place as you start to build a nettTracker company file. With nettTracker set up correctly, you'll be sure to save yourself hours of time when it's either time to close the month end or the financial year end, ensuring all of the necessary accounting journal adjustments have been made. The tutorial shows you how to review and check settings, add fixed assets to the asset register, check depreciation and dispose assets, create prepayments and accruals, view projections of expected adjustments, run the month-end process, and close the year-end. If you've just created a subscription, you will have been directed to create your first company. If you don't see this option, or perhaps you're a team member within a business or accounting firm that looks after multiple companies, you can use the option to view all companies or create a new company from the account menu accessed from the top right corner in nettTracker. This tutorial is made up of over 20 components, and each section can be accessed quickly by clicking on the timestamps that are listed within the YouTube description. Alternatively, each individual section can be accessed from within the knowledge base, and you'll find a link to that within the help and support pages. The tutorial begins at the point just after the option to create a new company has been selected, followed by the option to connect to your chosen accounting software, currently QuickBooks Online, Sage or Xero, or to use nettTracker in standalone mode. So let's begin. On the initial connection to your accounting software, some basic information will be detected. That will be the company name, the currency used in the business, and also the first financial year to be created in nettTracker. It's important to check the dates are correct, as this can affect calculations and also when your journals are going to be created in future. Don't worry too much if you do get these wrong, though. You can reset the company later if required. With the information correct, choose the Save option at the bottom of the screen. After saving, you will be directed to Company Settings. When logged into a nettTracker company file, the company settings can be accessed at any time by clicking on the Settings cog in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. Company settings are broken down into several sections. General company options affect a lot of the global settings within nettTracker. Within company users, we can see who has access to this company file. We can see the current financial year settings, and we can change if applicable. The accounting provider options, we have the option to switch to a different accounting provider if necessary. When connected to accounting software, we can see the nominal accounts, your chart of account categories that are available for use. The Asset Register tab contains settings which are specifically for fixed assets. Accruals and prepayments, we have settings which are specifically for accruals, prepayments, deferred and accrued income. And coming soon, settings which are specifically for the monitoring of loans. General company options can affect a lot of the settings globally in nettTracker, so they can impact our fixed assets and also our accrual and prepayments journals as an example. Starting at the top, we're in the general area. If we were wanting to make any changes to any of these settings, we can use the pencil icon on the far right of the screen. If I wanted to make changes to the name, for an example, then I simply click within the field and make changes, and if I have made any changes, I then click on Save once I've done so. Within the journal options, let's take a look at those settings. If I want to make sure that my journals are automatically created at the end of each period, usually the end of each month, then I will make sure that that box is ticked. If I want to prevent any journals from being posted into previous accounting periods, now I want to choose to disable backdated journals, so I'm going to make sure that that's also selected, and then again I will save my changes. Now below that we have journal numbering, so we can allow the accounting software to automatically allocate a journal reference number, or we might want to use a specific nettTracker journal reference, and again I'm going to choose to edit that and allow nettTracker to create the journal references for me, and I'm using a prefix here of NT for nettTracker journals, and again saving my changes. Should I use additional tracking options in my accounting software, class or locations or departments as an example, then I might want to use those options. So again I'm going to choose to enable classes by clicking on the pencil icon first to make the changes, choose to enable classes, and I will save my changes. If you've made a few errors setting the company up, there are some options within Advanced Company Actions that can help. If things have got really messy, perhaps deleting the company is the best thing to do, and then you can start over completely from fresh. However, if all of your mappings and your asset account groups are correct, perhaps you've just imported the wrong values, then the reset option is the best one to use. The Asset Register tab contains all of the settings that are pertinent to the tracking and the calculation of depreciation for your fixed assets. It's really important to check these settings carefully. It can affect the way that depreciation is calculated, how journal entries are created. It can also affect how we identify new asset purchases, and it can also affect any automation that you want to have in place. This is going to include the depreciation method, creating asset groups and mapping them to your chart of accounts, your automation settings, and your depreciation rules. To make any changes to the settings in place, we need to click on the pencil icon on the far right. Let's start with the depreciation method. Here we can choose if the depreciation method is calculated on a month-by-month basis, whether it is calculated in year. The depreciation journals will always be posted on a monthly basis, but the in-year option means that a full year's worth of depreciation will be applied to an asset regardless of the month in which it is purchased. We'll select by month. You can also choose whether depreciation is calculated on a month-by-month basis, reporting period, or if it is calculated on the number of days. That means if it is purchased part way through a month, it will be based on a daily calculation. I'm going to select reporting period, so a full month within the month of purchase. When depreciation journals are posted, the default is to set the journals to be condensed. That will create a summary of all of the balances required to be adjusted between the balance sheet and the profit and loss. You can remove the tick so that a fully detailed journal is created. However, if you do have a lot of assets, that could create a journal with hundreds or thousands of lines, and it could actually slow down the performance of your accounting software. When fixed assets are disposed, nettTracker will create automatically all of the required journal entries. When the cost value is removed from the balance sheet, if you use the same account that you used when the asset was purchased, then you simply want to put a tick into that box, and nettTracker will automatically use that account during the mapping process. If you do use separate balance sheet accounts to monitor movements such as additions in year, depreciation in year, and disposals during the year, you can select this tick box to ensure those movements are adjusted to your total accumulated balances. In this example, that option is not required, so we simply choose to save those settings. Next, we need to create our asset groups and map them to the chart of accounts in our accounting software. And we do that by first selecting the option to create a new group. The first thing we need to do is give our asset group a name. Then we can select what is going to be the default depreciation rule used with this asset group, and this can be overridden when assets are created. If you don't see the depreciation rule you require, you can create your own depreciation rules in the depreciation rules area. Previously, we've selected that when assets are disposed, we're going to use the same balance sheet accounts used when assets are acquired. So that tick box is already in place, but you can remove it. You can add further notes, but it's not mandatory. Within general account mappings, we select which balance sheet account should be used to track new asset purchases. You can select from the drop down. You can also search for that account. You do exactly the same for your balance sheet account for depreciation by selecting from the drop down or searching. And again the same for the profit and loss account used for the depreciation expense. If you don't see all of the expected chart of account categories, you can refresh the list using the option on the right. Next, in the disposal account mappings area, we can see that the balance sheet options are greyed out because we've selected to use the same accounts already used for our asset purchases because of the tick box that is in place. I simply need to map the profit and loss account used for our gains and losses, which in this example is going to be proceeds from the sale of assets. With my mappings complete, I'll select the option to save. Let's create another quickly for motor vehicles. So selecting create new group. So naming the asset group, selecting the required depreciation rule, choosing to map to the account for our asset additions, mapping the balance sheet account for depreciation, mapping the profit and loss account for the depreciation expense, and then selecting the profit and loss account for the gains and losses on disposal of assets. All mappings in place, we can save. We can now see within the asset groups and account mappings area for the different asset groups that we have created, so computer equipment as an example, we can see the mappings in place for our additions, depreciation and depreciation expense against our balance sheet accounts and our profit and loss, and for our disposal mappings, the cost adjustment, the adjustment for depreciation and the disposal expense to the same balance sheet accounts but a different account for our proceeds of sale of assets. And we can also see from the summary page the default depreciation rule. If you need to make any edits to those asset groups, we can simply go to the pencil icon on the far right where we can edit the asset group and make any required changes. Scrolling down a little, we'll move on next to the automation settings. Again, to make any changes, we need to click on the pencil icon on the far right. First of all, we can choose to refresh transactions. Once a fortnight, a routine takes place that means that nettTracker will contact your accounting software provider to look for any new transactions. If it's found any new transactions, new asset purchases, we can create assets from those. And we can choose to automatically add those asset purchases to the asset register. You can put a threshold in place, so only to add new assets if, for example, the value of an asset exceeded £500, $500. When a new asset is created, you can allow nettTracker to create asset references for you using the option to use generated asset references. You can allow nettTracker to put a prefix in and what the first number should be. With your settings in place, simply choose to save. In the final section, we have our depreciation rules. 16 commonly used depreciation rules are already in place, but you can create further depreciation rules as and when you need to. Simply click on the plus icon towards the top right hand corner of this area. The first thing we need to do is give our depreciation rule a name and then select what type of depreciation is this. Is it to be set over a number of years, over a number of months, reducing balance, which is your declining balance, or double decline? Here I'm going to select, this is going to be over 27 months. From the drop down, I'll select the number of months that I wish. And now I can choose to save. The new depreciation rule will appear in my list, and if I need to edit the rule, I can click on the pencil icon, and if I choose to delete it, I can click on the trash icon. That brings us to the end of our asset register settings, where we've reviewed the depreciation method, created asset groups and mapped them to our chart of accounts, review the automation settings, and also reviewed our depreciation rules and created further rules if required. Within our settings for accruals and prepayments, there are two sections that we need to review. Our general section and the accrual and prepayment groups. Starting off with the general area, we can choose to edit using the pencil icon on the far right. Our first option is the calculation resolution of our prepayments, which is set on a daily basis. If we wish to change that to reporting period, we can do, and that means that our prepayments will be adjusted very much straight line by month as opposed to the number of days. We can also choose whether our journals are going to be condensed or are going to be detailed. For prepayments, you might want to have them detailed. I'll select the option to save my setting. Within the accrual and prepayment group section, we can create an accrual or prepayment group, and we can map that to a balance sheet account in our accounting software. Let's start off with creating a group for accrued expenses, but you can do this in any order. We create a new group and we give our group a name. We choose the type of group this is, which in this example is for accrued expenses. You can add further notes, but it's not mandatory, and then we select the balance sheet account this needs to be mapped to. Then we simply choose to save. I'm going to repeat this now for prepaid insurance. Selecting the group for prepaid expenses. Another for prepaid subscriptions. So in this example, I have two prepayment groups, although you could just use the one. Let's create another for accrued income. And 2 more for deferred income types. Last one. So now we can see we have a summary of our different accrual and prepayment groups. So as an example, at the top I have a group that is called accrued expenses, and the type of this group is a accrued expense. This is mapped to the balance sheet for accrued expenses. I have an account for prepaid insurance. Again, the type is for prepaid expenses, and the balance sheet mapping for this is to prepaid insurance. When we create the individual prepayment and accrual items, those items already will be mapped to the balance sheet accounts used here, but we will use the appropriate profit and loss categories when we create the items. With all of your settings in place, you're now in position to start importing some of your opening balances, and let's start by looking at importing our fixed assets. Selecting the menus on the left hand side of the screen, we open up the assets area, and towards the bottom of that section select import assets. On this page for importing assets, we have a shortcut link where we can download a template which we need to complete before we import the assets. On the screen we can see a completed import template. At the top of the template you have instructions which explain how the template should be completed. It is mandatory to complete information where the column headers are in yellow, so the asset group, the depreciation method, the purchase date, the description, the original cost and the accumulated depreciation to date must be complete before you attempt to import the template. The depreciation start date, which is the date from which the depreciation will be calculated from, will automatically default to the purchase date unless a separate date is entered there. The salvage value, also known as the expected residual value of an asset, can be set here if you wish. This will mean that the asset will not depreciate below the value that is set. If you have enabled provider tracking options in your company settings to use classes or locations as an example, it's important that your classes and locations have also been completed in the template. If you've enabled the setting but not selected a class or location, the template will not import. With our import template complete, we can now upload the assets. We can choose to browse for the file within our folders or simply drop the file in. The import screen contains details of all of the assets we are about to import, and if we wish we can make changes at this point, including changing the group, class and location, and the depreciation rule. Some errors on the import will be detected. If I scroll down to the bottom of this import list, I can see that 2 boxes are in red where the asset group had been entered in error. I can select the correct asset group, and just towards the left of the list those 2 assets will also be identified, so we can make sure that we have resolved those before attempting to complete the import. After importing the assets, we will be directed to the asset register, and there's a separate tutorial that reviews the asset register in more detail. There are a couple of quick checks we can make to ensure that our assets have imported correctly. First of all, by selecting the summary option from the left menu, we have a very quick summary of our asset group totals, where we can see the brought forward cost figures and the accumulated depreciation to date for each of our asset groups. Another useful check can be found within our dashboard. If you come in for the first time, you may need just to refresh your browser. But what we can see within the asset register dashboard is the total cost of assets and the total depreciation to date, giving us our net book value. And from your accounting software, we also detect the net book value from your balance sheet. And this will be as of the next month end date, which in this instance would be 31st of January 2024. Towards the right of the asset register dashboard, we have this pie chart containing the net book values of your different asset groups. With all of the necessary company settings in place, and settings in place for our prepayments and accruals, we might want to import our current list of prepayments or perhaps our current list of deferred revenue items. And we can do that using an import template. From the left navigation, we can open up the accruals section, and towards the bottom of that list, we have the option to import prepaid. If you've already imported fixed assets, the process here is almost identical, but if not, what you can do from the import prepaid expenses screen, first of all, is use the download option to download a template where you'll need to copy your prepaid items into. On the screen, you can now see a completed import template for your prepayments. Instructions at the top of the page indicate how the different columns should be completed. All of the columns with yellow headers are mandatory and do require information in place. So the group name will be the prepayment group you've created in nettTracker, the item of each of the prepayments, the profit and loss account where the prepayment will be released to. You have an actual invoice date. In here, it's not too important on the actual invoice date if this is part of your opening balances. And the reason for that is because the value here is not what the original invoice value would have been, or cost value would have been, but what is the current balance left to be adjusted. So in this example, there's 2,000, and we're going to start making those adjustments from the 1st of July. And there are 4 months left. So from that 2,000, there would be £500 or $500 to be adjusted every single month. If you have enabled settings in nettTracker for provider location tracking, for example using classes on locations, it's important that your template includes using locations or classes, otherwise the information will not be imported. With our prepayment template complete and saved, we can choose to search for the file within our folders or use the option to drop here. Any errors identified, as an example a missing class, you'll find a red box around that field, so we'll change that. And now we can attempt to import the list of prepayments using the option to complete. After importing your list of prepayments, you will be directed to the statement area for accruals and prepayments. On this page, we can select within the drop-down the group where we've imported those items to, in this example being prepaid expenses. If we scroll to the bottom of this page, we can see our group total, so the total of our prepayments, and we will also see the total detected from our accounting software from the balance sheet for that prepayment type. By selecting Projection from the left menus and selecting the required prepayment group, we can see our expected adjustments to be made in the future months. By selecting the dashboard from our menus on the left and scrolling down towards the accrual and prepayment section, we can see a summary of our prepayments and accruals, where in this example we have 2 prepayment groups, 36 items within the group, a total value of current prepayments and a total value detected from the balance sheet, and no difference. Each time we open a nettTracker company file, towards the top of the screen we'll see the name of the company that we have accessed. If we move to the menus towards the left, the first place we land is always going to be the dashboard. Below that we have our transactions area. So this is where we'll need to refresh any transactions that we've entered into our accounting software if we need to bring them into nettTracker to be reviewed and to be initially converted as assets. On a later release we'll be able to review transactions posted to prepayments. If any of the menus in the left hand side contain an alert symbol, it indicates that area requires our attention. So assets, for example, shows there is a transaction that needs to be reviewed and possibly converted into a fixed asset. Moving back towards the menus available on the left hand side of the screen, we can expand or collapse those menu groups. So clicking on the arrow will expand or collapse. So I can expand the assets menu where I could create a new asset or a new kit. Again, we could access the summary of our fixed assets, look at the asset register in detail, download the asset register, view the depreciation forecast, download the depreciation forecast, or import assets using an Excel spreadsheet. Below assets we have the accruals features where we can create new prepayments and accruals. We can view statements of our accruals and prepayments. We can download statements of our accruals and prepayments. We can view projections of our adjustments, download those projections. We can also import a list of prepaids using an Excel template, and we can import deferred income, again using an import template. The ability to create prepayments and deferred income entries from transactions in your accounting software is coming later in 2025. Coming soon, we should have the ability to track our loans and automatically create our interest adjustments. When it's time to process all of your monthly journal entry adjustments for your depreciation, accruals and prepayments, we can do that by going into the period end menu. If you have enabled automated journal entries within your company settings, you may not need to come into this area. However, you may need to make some additional adjustments. So even if the month end has been processed, you can come back here, select the date and then select the option to run at the bottom of the screen. If we take a look into the journals area within our left hand menus, we have a summary of all of the journals that have been posted. Clicking on the line for the journal entry will open up more information. We can also see that there are errors. There is a separate video tutorial for resolving journal errors. In the bottom left hand corner we can access all of the company settings. In the top right hand corner of the screen are your account options. It's here where you can manage your subscription, you can view all of the companies that you have access to, you can create additional companies depending on your subscription, and you can also sign out from here. To the left of account you have the help menu. Help and support includes links to articles, video tutorials and the ability to contact support using a ticket system. There is also access to our privacy policy and terms of service. Now that we've taken a look at all of the available menus, let's head back to the dashboard and see the information that's reported to us. The first thing we can see is our financial year. We can see our financial year start date and end date, the next month end date, and the date that nettTracker was last accessed. To the right of that, we can see our company processing status. So currently we've processed all of our required monthly adjustments. We can also see our year-end status. In this example, we've not yet reached our company year-end. And also we can see if any errors have been detected when attempting to post a journal entry to our accounting software. Below this, we have a summary of our fixed assets. We can see the total number of fixed asset groups, the total cost of assets acquired, the total depreciation to date, the current net book value of all of our fixed assets, and also we can see the net book value of assets per the balance sheet in our accounting software. We can also then report a difference between the two. In this example, there is a difference which relates to asset purchases not yet added to the fixed asset register and some errors with our depreciation journals. After resolving our journal errors and ensuring that our asset register is updated with the transaction, we now have a difference of 0 between the net book value of assets and the value of assets per the balance sheet. Just to the right of our asset summary information, we can see the status of our assets. In this example, one fixed asset requires the depreciation to be updated. There are no pending transactions and no erroneous assets. An asset may become erroneous if it has been created using a transaction in your accounting software and then later that transaction has been edited or deleted. Looking at the depreciation forecast, I can see the single asset where depreciation is overdue for posting. I can update that simply by going to the period end, selecting to process the previous month again. Once complete, everything is now fully up to date. The pie chart on the far right indicates how our assets are made up. If we hover the mouse into the segments, we can see the value of the assets against each asset group. Scrolling further down, we can see a summary of our accruals and prepayments. Where values are in place, in this example for prepaid expenses, we can see the total number of groups for prepayments. We can see the total number of live items within those groups. We can see the total value of prepaid expenses in place. And we can see the total value of prepayments per the balance sheet in the accounting software. Both of those values should agree. Let's start by going to the asset register from the menu on the left of the screen, so selecting asset register. The first thing we can do is we can select the period that we are viewing. So in this instance we're looking at January to December 25, but we could select a different financial year. Coming later in 2025, we'll have the option to report between two dates. Next, you can select which asset group you are viewing. So here we are currently reviewing computer equipment, but we could go into motor vehicles in this example, or switch into office furniture, and then back into computer equipment. To the right of the asset group selector, we can choose to search by asset name or reference. So as an example, we enter the asset reference number and click on the magnifying glass to search, or we can add a name, choose to search. We can click on the cross to clear the filter. By default, nettTracker will display 25 assets per page, but you can change that setting. Using the arrows, you can move between pages. We'll go to your first page, or to the last page. The settings cog towards the right allows you to change the columns that are in view. So removing ticks from boxes will remove the columns from the asset register view. So for example, removing asset reference, the asset reference column is no longer visible. After removing a few more ticks, we can see that our asset register can be a little bit easier to view, as now I've only got total cost, disposal adjustments, total depreciation and disposal adjustments as the values in this asset register. The pencil icon on the far right can be used to make batch changes to classes and locations when multiple assets have been selected. To edit the information of an asset, or to perhaps change its status, to delete it or dispose, we first of all need to select the tick box to the left of an asset. The tools icon appears where we can click on the tools and select from the menu. Kit options, deleting and disposing are covered in separate video tutorials. Using the edit option, you can change some of the asset properties. The asset reference as an example. If you find the asset reference area is greyed out, it means in your company settings you've selected to enable automatic asset referencing. So disable that feature if you wish to apply an asset reference manually. If you do make any changes, then you'll need to save those changes using the option at the bottom. If we select the option to view details of the asset, we can see some basic information about the asset, including when it was imported, what the current value of the asset is. On the right hand side of the screen, we can see a trajectory of the value of the asset based on the forecast depreciation. Towards the bottom of the screen, we can see depreciation postings that have been made, and if we work through those postings going towards the next pages, we can see the depreciation that is being forecast. Back on the asset register screen, you can change the way that some of the columns are sorted. So for example, if I hover over the name, there's a little arrow just towards the right of the name, so we can sort by that column. And if I go over to the acquired column, I could sort acquired ascending and descending. Within your left hand menu below assets, you have the ability to download your asset register. First of all, you select the period for which you want the asset register to be downloaded, and then choose the export feature at the bottom of the screen. After opening the Excel file from within your downloads area, you should find all of your assets and asset groups on one page. Your totals will be shown at the bottom of the page. In addition to your fixed asset register, you can also access a summary of your fixed assets from the left menu. So selecting summary, we have a summary of our asset group totals, and this is very useful when reconciling these asset groups to the values on your balance sheet. The values will default to the current financial year, but you can change the period if required. We can view the depreciation forecast first by selecting the assets menus and then choosing depreciation forecast. The depreciation forecast includes projections of depreciation to be posted in future, and it also includes the values of depreciation already posted. Values in green indicate that the depreciation has been updated to the fixed asset register, and where appropriate, journal entries have been made to the accounting software. Values in blue indicate future depreciation postings which have not yet been updated to the fixed asset register and not yet posted to accounting software. On this page, if we scroll down, we can see there are two values in red, and this is where an asset has been added after depreciation already processed for those periods. To update the depreciation for that asset, we simply need to go to our period end menu, process the previous month again, and we do that just by go back to the last month end and running the month end, and the adjustments will be made for that asset alone. If we scroll down to the bottom of this page, we can see that the values have been updated. Just scrolling back to the top of the depreciation forecast page, you have the option to view the depreciation already posted for previous periods. You can select between the asset groups. You can search for your assets. You can change the number of assets displayed per page, and you've got the option to move between the pages when appropriate. You also have the option to download the depreciation forecast into Excel, and you simply do that by selecting Download Forecast from the menus in the left-hand side of the screen. With the option open, you simply need to select the financial period you wish to download the forecast for, and then select the Export option at the bottom of the page. Depending on the size of your fixed asset register, it may be downloaded immediately. In other instances, the depreciation forecast will be sent to your email address, where you will be able to open and download it from there. With the depreciation forecast downloaded and now open in Excel, for every single asset we can see its asset group, the name of the asset, the class and location where appropriate, and for each month of the financial year we can see the depreciation. We can create fixed assets in nettTracker based on the transactions that have been entered in your accounting software. We can see from the asset register dashboard that there is a difference of 7,500 between the balance sheet and the asset register, and that is because new purchases have been created in our accounting software that have not yet been updated to our fixed asset register. nettTracker has the ability to automatically detect transactions and update our fixed asset register for us without ever needing to log in. Let's just review those settings first. If we head to our settings menu, selecting asset register, and then scrolling down we have our automation settings, which we can edit using the pencil icon on the right, where we can choose to automatically refresh for transactions, create assets, and select a threshold, so only assets will be created when the value exceeds 500 in this example. And we can also elect to create asset reference numbers for us as well. Now please bear in mind that automation routines currently happen twice a month. So that is at month end and in the middle of the month. So if you've just created an asset purchase in your accounting software, that may not automatically appear in nettTracker. So we need to refresh our transactions first and then add our assets, even if this setting has been enabled. So let's do that now. I'm going to go to transactions in the menu in the left of the screen, selecting the option to refresh. I can now see that I have some assets to be reviewed. Within our pending transactions, we have two asset purchases that make up the value of the 7,500 where we had a difference on our asset register summary on the dashboard. Using the settings cog on the far right, I can choose to create an asset based on this transaction. The description has come through automatically. I can add a supplier name if necessary and add a further description, more like a memo note if I wish. The cost cannot be changed. I can add a residual salvage value. The asset group is selected by default based upon the account category used in the accounting software. The default depreciation rule is in place. I can change if I wish. The acquisition date has come through based on the transaction. There's no depreciation brought forward. The depreciation start date is based on the acquisition date, but I can change that if I wish. I could also choose to defer the depreciation and start it later. The location and tracking codes used in your accounting software should automatically filter through. With all of our selections in place, we can simply select to save to create the asset. I'll repeat the process for the next asset. Simply selecting the option to save. The two transactions used to create assets to put onto the asset register will appear within the Process tab. Reviewing the asset register dashboard, we can see that we no longer have a difference between the net book value of assets and the balance on our balance sheet. If we take a look at our fixed asset register, selecting the asset group for office furniture where the two assets have been added, we can see that our desks and chairs are now included. At this point, no depreciation has been calculated. Even if the month end had already been processed in which those assets were purchased, we'll need to run the period end again. If we were to look at the forecast, reviewing office furniture, we could see that those assets were overdue and the depreciation needs to be brought up to date. To do that, we can go to period end, selecting the previous month, and choosing to run. The assets have been brought up to date, and if we review the asset register, taking a look at office furniture, we can see that depreciation is now up to date. In some instances, you might need to create a new asset in nettTracker manually. It could be that you're not actually connected to your accounting software, or perhaps you've deleted an asset in error and you need to add it back, or maybe you need to create an adjustment related to asset purchased in a previous financial year. To do this, from our menus on the left, we select the Asset section and then New Asset. To start off with, you add an asset reference, if applicable, the name of the asset, a supplier if you wish, it's not mandatory, and you can add a description which really is just additional notes regarding the asset. Then you add the financial information, so the cost, the residual salvage value if you wish. Just moving down a little, we've got the asset group, which will be motor vehicles in this example. We can add a depreciation rule. Then we can choose the acquisition and depreciation dates. If you select a date from a previous financial year, you'll also be able to put in values for accumulated depreciation to date. Then moving down, you can add your location and classes if applicable. With the information complete, choose the Save option, bottom center of the screen, and the asset will be then added to your asset register. In this video, we'll take a look at how we can split an asset into a kit, which is really useful if you actually want to partially dispose of an asset as well. First off, we need to open the asset register. So from the assets menu on the left of the screen, we go into the asset register. In this example, I'm going to change the asset group to office furniture. And we can see within office furniture, we actually have assets where there are a number of assets that were purchased at once. So taking this example where there are 5 desks, we can actually split this into 5 separate items by clicking into the box, opening up the tools icon, and then selecting in our kit options to create a kit from the asset. Within this screen, we can select how many lines the asset is going to be split into using the plus icon on the far right hand side. We then need to add a name to each asset, a reference if applicable. You can add a description, but it's not mandatory, and then select the percentage which is going to be allocated to each asset. You can see the value allocated to each asset and the total value of all of the assets combined. You can also see the total percentage which will need to equal 100% before saving. The total allocated value needs to be the exact same amount as the current net book value as per the asset that we are splitting into a kit. In this example it isn't, and we will not be able to close until we change the value of 1 or 2 of the assets. So in this example I shall change this to 749.99. And now the save button has become green and I will be able to save. The kit containing the multiple assets will initially display on your asset register as a single line item, but when we click on the expander icon, we can see the breakdown of the kit, and each of the line items can be treated individually. So if I want to dispose of part of this kit, I can simply select the icon and choose the dispose. We can use a kit to create a collection of assets within an asset group. So let's see how we can do that. First of all, I need to create a new kit, and I can do that using the option on the left hand side of the screen, using new kit. You can apply an asset reference to your kit, but it's not mandatory. You must give your kit a name. The acquisition date is actually the date that you create the kit. Then we must select an asset group for which the kit is going to be used. From the list of assets below, we can select the assets which should be included in the kit. We need to select at least 2. Once we've selected 2 or more, the save button will become green, and then we can create our kit, including our assets. We're directed to the screen which displays our kit and how it is made up of our kit members, which are the individual assets. When we view the asset register, we can see the kit has been created, and using the expander icon, we can see the assets included within the kit. We'll work through the process of marking an asset as disposed, selecting this amplifier as an example. Before we do that, let's just review our settings for disposals. So within our settings, we can select the asset register, and within our asset groups and mappings, we have computer equipment, where we can see our disposal account mappings. The cost of our asset, the disposal, will be marked against computer equipment. The depreciation account for disposal to date is going to be adjusted to accumulated depreciation, and the profit and loss affected by the cost and the depreciation, in this instance I'm changing that to make sure that that goes to proceeds of sale of assets. If an asset is sold, the sales transaction needs to be recorded in your accounting software, whether it's an invoice, a deposit, or using a journal. In this example, I'm going to use an invoice, but what's important is that the income is going to be recorded to the proceeds from sale of assets, the same account as the profit and loss account for the journals used in nettTracker. Recording the sales invoice to asset disposals will ensure that the correct account is used. At this stage, the only entry in the account for proceeds from sale of assets is the invoice we've just recorded. Back in nettTracker, let's now record the asset disposal. First of all, in the asset register, we select the asset to be disposed. Then, using the tools icon, we select the option to dispose. We select the disposal date. We can enter the proceeds from sale. And if required, we can reverse any depreciation. We then select to save. Once the asset has been disposed, it will remain permanently highlighted with the disposal date now showing, the sale proceeds displaying, and we can see what the gain or loss was on the sale of that asset. nettTracker will have made all of the required journal entries to reflect the disposal, and if we look back at our accounting software, we can see in the account for proceeds from sale of assets that now reports the same total gain or loss on the sale of the asset. If an asset has been disposed in error, we can very easily reverse the process in nettTracker. From the asset register, the first thing we need to do is select the asset to be corrected. From the tools options, we select the option to reverse disposal. nettTracker will create all of the required reversing journal entries. However, if you've already deleted those journal entries, you could choose to skip correction journal. To complete the reversal of the disposal, select the option to save. After refreshing the browser, we can see that the asset is no longer marked as disposed. In this example, I can see there is a difference of $12,000 between the net book value of assets and the value of assets on the balance sheet. That is because an asset has been added in error. If we take a look at our asset register, so we go to assets and select the asset register. And I know that this particular asset is within motor vehicles, so I can select motor vehicles. This asset has been added in error. I tick the box and the tools icon appears where I can select the option to delete the asset. I can choose the date I want the asset to be deleted. And choose save. We can see the asset no longer appears on the asset register for motor vehicles, and if we head back to the dashboard and if I refresh that page, we can see there's no longer a difference in the asset register summary. If you've got multiple prepayment or deferred income adjustments to put into place, you can save time by going to the accruals menus and selecting the options to either import prepaid or import deferred income using the Excel import templates that are available. However, if you just have one item that you need to put into place, then you could simply do that by using the option to create a new item from the menu on the left hand side below accruals. In this example, let's imagine that we've paid for 6 months worth of marketing in advance and we'd now like to adjust monthly for that marketing cost. The first thing I need to do is select a group, in this example being prepaid expenses, and prepaid expenses is a group that I've already set up within my company settings within prepays and accruals. Next, you put in the core information about the prepayment. In this example, I've got marketing costs in magazine. You can add some additional notes and then select the profit and loss account that needs to be adjusted. We can start typing in to search and then select. And let's just scroll down a little first before we look at our financial data. We can add the actual invoice or bill date. If you've actually part released a prepayment, it doesn't necessarily have to be the actual original invoice bill date here. This could be the date of the balance that you are sort of bringing in and putting into place. So if you're just starting using the prepayments feature from the 1st of July, you could be bringing through a balance as of the 1st of July. Here though, I'm going to select the 15th of January. Next, I add the total amount to be prepaid. This could be the total bill from a supplier or what we've paid to them, or it could be the balance of a prepayment that I'm putting into place. If that value already exists within the balance sheet, then I simply need to tick the box to say that it's in place. If that amount is still sitting within my profit and loss, then I can leave the tick out of the box, because saving this entry later is going to create a journal first of all to take that balance out of my profit and loss and put it into the balance sheet. The date to start processing is really when our calculations will be made from. All the prepayment and accrual adjustments, just like depreciation, are always posted on the last day of a month. In this example, I've got the date to start processing to begin 1st of March 2025. So even though my supplier bill came in on January, it relates to a later period. If I'd have set the date the 16th of March and I had daily calculations within my prepayment settings, then I would have 15 days worth of prepayments adjusted within the first journal. Next, we select how many months left we need to make adjustments for. Finally, if we're using location and tracking options, we can make the appropriate selections before saving at the bottom center of the screen. If we take a quick look at our statement of prepayments, so by selecting statement and then selecting prepaid expenses from the drop down, if I scroll down to the bottom of this list, we can see our marketing costs are in place but currently in a status of pending until we've processed our monthly adjustments. If we look at our projections by selecting projection from the menus on the left, and again selecting prepaid expenses, scrolling to the bottom of this list, we could see the expected adjustments, negative 7,500, removing the value from the profit and loss, and then the monthly adjustments expected from March. We can create an adjustment for deferred income in exactly the same way, so let me do that very quickly for you now. First, select new item, select the group, deferred income. We enter details that relate to the deferred revenue and the profit and loss account to be adjusted. Then we add the financial data, the original invoice date, the value to be adjusted, when to start processing, how many monthly postings are required, and the location and tracking options if applicable. With all of the information in place, we simply save at the bottom. If we go to our statements area and select the deferred income for 36 months, we can see that we have our pending adjustment in place. If we go to our projections and again selecting deferred income, we can see the adjustments required. If you need to accrue for future costs or perhaps income Or maybe just list an accrual that you already have in place. It couldn't be simpler in nettTracker. Now first of all, what you need to do is go to your accruals menus down the left hand side, and within accruals select new item. In this example, I'm going to accrue for commission payable. I'll start off by selecting the group, which here is going to be accrued expenses, and this group has already been set up within my company settings in the accruals and prepay area. Within the core information, I give my accrual a name. I can add some notes if I'd like, and then I select the appropriate profit and loss account to be adjusted. I'll just scroll down a little before looking at the financial data. The first option within financial date is to select an invoice or bill date if known. If this is for an accrued expense and you don't know exactly when you're going to get a bill from a supplier or need to pay them, then you can leave this blank. And the same if it's for income being accrued, you can leave it blank if you don't know when you're going to raise a sales invoice. If you do enter a date here, nettTracker will auto-reverse the accrual at the month end of that date. Next, you enter the total amount to be accrued. And if you've already accrued this balance, or maybe part of that balance, enter that into the next field. The date to start processing is the date you wish to start building those accruals from. If the item has already been fully accrued, then you could simply use this month's date, with a number of postings left as 1. In this example, I'm building the accrual over the next 6 months. Finally, if you're using location and tracking options, make the appropriate selections before saving at the bottom center of the screen. If we take a quick look at our statement of accruals, which we can do by selecting the accruals area and then selecting statement, within our accrued expenses, we can see our monthly sales commission is currently in a status of pending because we've not processed any monthly adjustments yet. If we take a look at our projections for accruals, which we can do from the projections menu, we could see our adjustments required over the next 6 months. Next, I'm going to list an accrual where the value is already on the balance sheet. Simply go into new item, choosing accrued expenses. We enter all of the details that relate to the accrual as before, but in our financial data, the most important section I've got here is that the total accrual value is 14,000. The amount already in the balance sheet is 14,000, and I'm just selecting the number of monthly postings to 1, but nettTracker is not going to actually create any further postings until we decide to release the accrual. With everything in place, we simply use the save option at the bottom of the screen. If we take a look at our statement of accruals, we can see our sales commission is in place, currently active, but there are no further accruals required, and everything agrees back to the balance sheet. After accruing either income or expenditure, at some point we're going to want to reverse the provisions that we have in place. Let's take the example of some sales commission that I've accrued in this company. We've currently got 14,000 in place on the balance sheet. All of our accruals agree back to the total on our balance sheet. Let's imagine from the 14,000 that has been accrued, we've just incurred 7,000 worth of costs, and we wish to release that provision back to the profit and loss. This will leave the accrual with a balance of 7,000 that we can release at a later time. To release the accrual, select the tick box, and from the tools icon we choose to release accrual. The release date will be the date given to the journal when the accrual is reversed. Next, we can choose the amount to be released. This could be the full accrual, or in this case, part of the accrual. If this was an item where we still had future months to make accruals, you could choose to stop making further provisions at this point. With the selections in place, we click on the option to release, bottom center of the screen. After saving, we can see the balance of our accrual has been updated. We can also see that the total value of our accruals has been updated and agrees back to the total on the balance sheet in our accounting software. If you have a prepayment or an accrual item that you no longer need, it's really easy to remove them. It could be they were a duplicate entry, it could be that you just no longer need to keep adjusting for that balance. For whatever reason, we can use the delete option. Here I'm going to select an item that still has a balance of $874.76, and at this point all of my prepayments agree, but I just no longer need to make any further adjustments. First of all, what I'm going to do is select the tick box on the left of the prepayment. Then I'm going to select the tools icon. I no longer want this prepayment in place. I'm going to choose to delete. It's automatically selecting the year-end date to delete, but we can change that to be today's date. So in fact, I'm just going to put 27 in there for January. Now I'm going to select the option at the bottom to delete. nettTracker has deleted the item from the list and at the same time created a reversing journal to adjust for any balance that was remaining against that item. At the end of each financial period, usually at month end, you want to make some adjustments between your profit and loss and your balance sheet. This could be for depreciation on fixed assets, or perhaps to accrue for expected expenditure, or maybe to release some adjustments for prepayments that you have in place. The regular journal entries that you expect to be made every single month can be fully automated, so let's just check those settings first, just in case that's a feature that you want to have enabled. We go to our settings, and then within our general company options we have journal options. And by selecting the pencil icon to edit, we can see that we have the option to automate monthly journal postings and to also to disable backdated journal entries. Using the option to disable backdated journal entries means that we won't make any entries into a closed period. So if you had entered a fixed asset late and it should have had depreciation posted 2 or 3 months ago, additional journal adjustments will be made in the current month and not backdated. I'll select to save those options and head back to our dashboard. We can see on the dashboard the next month end date is set to be the 30th of April. We've actually passed that month and we can see that our company processing status tells us that we've passed that month and we should bring everything up to date. Currently my asset register dashboard is displaying a difference because I've brought all of the assets up to date, but I'm still looking at the balance sheet as of 30th of April. To process all of the required journal adjustments for my depreciation, accruals, prepayments, deferred revenue, we need to run our period end, and that is done using the option in the left hand side of the screen. When we select to process the period end, the date will default to the next expected month end date, in this example being the 30th of April. We simply choose to run to process the monthly adjustments. After processing, we land back on the dashboard. I can see that I still have a difference here of 7,500, and that's because I've updated assets that were purchased in June and the next month end date is 31st of May. Let's process the period end again, this time taking it up to the end of December. Choosing to run. We can now see the balance of our fixed assets and our balance sheet agree, and so do our accruals and our prepayments balances. If we review the journal made in our accounting software, We can see all of the necessary accounts are debited and credited. In this example, I'm using classes and locations against my assets and my prepayments. My fixed asset journal entries are condensed per the settings within my company settings. If I scroll down where we get to our prepayment journal entries, we can see the details are in place because those journal entries are not condensed and show the full detail. Once a company has processed all of the months in the current financial year, you will receive an email notification, but in addition, the year-end menu will appear in the left navigation. Step 1 is to click into the year-end menu and select the option Yes. With the financial year-end process started, the year-end status will appear on your dashboard. You can still add additional fixed assets and you can make adjustments for your prepayments and accruals for that current financial year. If you need to process further journal adjustments, then you can simply go back to the period end and process the period for the last month of the financial year, and any adjustments required for subsequent months will be journaled as usual. After reviewing our accounting software, we've discovered an additional fixed asset to be purchased. That's coming through in our assets in transactions. So I'm going to ensure that that is created. A reversing journal has come through when an asset has been disposed, and I don't want to use that transaction, so I can choose to ignore it. Let's just take a look at our assets. If I'm going to go to my depreciation forecast, actually for the asset I've just purchased, which is in office furniture, and I can see that that particular asset needs some depreciation to be posted. So I can simply now go back to my period end and post for the last month again. And now I can see the depreciation has been posted. During the year-end process, we can also adjust for any depreciation. An adjustment column appears on the far right-hand side of the screen. If I just scroll over to the right slightly, an end-of-year value also appears. By clicking into the pencil, we can increase or decrease the depreciation. Increasing the depreciation, we put in a positive value or a negative to decrease. We can now see the end of year value has been reduced. At this point in time, no journal entries will be processed until we close the year end. After reviewing and reconciling all of our fixed assets, prepayments and accruals, we're now in a position to close our year end. And we do that by going to the year end menu in the left navigation and selecting the next financial year end date, which should automatically be 12 months on from our current year end. So we should simply need to choose to save at the bottom of the screen. If we select the dashboard from our left navigation, we should see that our financial year dates have changed. If we choose to look at our asset register, so from the left menu selecting asset register, we can choose to look between the different financial years. If I select the asset group office furniture where I had adjusted the depreciation, I can see the asset right at the top has the correct brought forward depreciation where the current net book value is 3,000. This brings us to the end of this video tutorial. As mentioned previously, within the help area of nettTracker, there are links to our knowledge base And within there, all of these videos are broken down into smaller sections. As an example, within Getting Started, all of the company settings are here, and we've got a direct link to those video tutorials from within there.